Hello everyone. So today we are going to see this new guideline, amniocentesis and chorionic villus biopsy. And this is the only guideline that has been published in this era of COVID. So it of course has its own importance. So you should know this guideline thoroughly. But this is a very small guideline, thankfully, and it doesn't have many things to remember. So this is just a gist of the guideline. Hope you go through this and make some save some time for yourself. Okay, so these are the key recommendations that you see just on the first page of the guideline, right? And these are the key recommendations, and this is the gist of the whole guideline. That is, the woman should be informed that the additional risk of miscarriage following amniocentesis or CVS performed by an appropriately trained operator is likely to be below 0.5%. So remember, every word is important here. 0.5%, the number is of course very important, and it is done by appropriately trained operator only then, right? If the operator is not trained, then of course the chances of having additional risk of miscarriage are increased, right? Amniocentesis should not be performed prior to 15 weeks of gestation. CVS shouldn't be performed before 10 weeks of gestation. We are going to see why as we go through the GTG. Where possible, to reduce the risk of technical challenge, CVS should be performed from 11 weeks of gestation onwards, right? So this is a good practice point. What is the good practice point? So this is basically what is good for the patient. The good practice point is the doing the practice which is beneficial for the patient, right? So it is always it should be performed from 11 weeks, so that is better for the patient. Women with multiple pregnancies should be informed that the additional risk of miscarriage for twin pregnancies following a CVS or amniocentesis by a trained operator is 1%. So it is doubled, of course. Okay, so when it is 0.5 for a single pregnancy, for the twin pregnancy it has doubled. Screening results of for the blood-borne viruses, viral load and antigen test results should be reviewed when an invasive test is considered, and individualized risk of a viral transmission should be discussed. So we are going to see as the things come ahead in the guideline. Okay, so this is the basic thing. Now, pregnant women are offered amniocentesis or CVS for prenatal diagnosis, right? For what do we do this amniocentesis or CVS? Whenever we assume or we suspect that there is a higher chance of aneuploidy, on the screening result has shown the higher chance of aneuploidy. So when it is high risk on the double marker or the quadruple marker test, right? Fetal structural anomaly or a known risk of inherited sorry, genetic disease, right? So whenever the child has any structural anomaly, or whenever there is inherited genetic disease, that the parents have some genetic disease, so there is a chance of it getting inherited, or whenever there is a higher chance of aneuploidy, we send the patients for amniocentesis and CVS, right? Implementation of national combined aneuploidy screening and increasing use of cell-free DNA testing from maternal blood has resulted in the significant decline in screen positive results, right? So because we are doing the screening test, and also there is cell-free DNA which is now available, right? So it is only getting the blood from the mother, so it is non-invasive test, and because of this non-invasive test, the invasive tests of amniocentesis and CVS are reduced. But of course, CVS and amniocentesis are the definitive diagnostic test for aneuploidy in pregnancy, right? Because all others are screening tests. Moving ahead, how it happens. So they have given a video of amniocentesis and CVS on the website, and I think you should go through it at least once to find out if you don't see whether you miss any point there, right? And these are basic things. Before any procedure, take consent, and the consent should include procedure risk, timing, and the method of communicating results, right? It should involve whether the sample or tissue needs to be stored, the benefits of it, the alternatives, and any option to opt out of it. Wherever possible, the local data for procedure related to complications should be quoted, right? So you should remember that whenever you take consent, what is the basic thing? You have to tell all the complications to the patients. You should be telling what time they have to come, whether they have to come prepared, unprepared, just like any other procedure, right? Women should receive information on aftercare, including where appropriate the need for prophylactic anti-D. So remember, the only point important here, which may come as your EMQ or SBA, is remember anti-D. It needs to be given in amniocentesis and CVS. So whenever you have a non-sensitized rhesus negative woman, see whether see that she is to be given prophylactic anti-D. Remember this point, right? And the indications to seek medical advice following the procedure. So she should be given appropriate advice regarding anti-D. Now this is another chart which is important. So I directly took the chart from the guideline. So what are the additional risks of miscarriage? So we have seen that whenever it is to be done by a trained operator, the risk is 0.5%, right? But remember that whenever it is to be done in twin pregnancy, the risk increases to 1%. Women should be informed that the additional risk of pregnancy performed by an appropriately trained operator is likely to be below 0.5, right? Whether it is amniocentesis or transabdominal CVS, for both. Now, whenever the amniotic fluid, whenever we take that, we aspirate that, and if it is cloudy or purulent, remember that we need to send it to the microbiology department, sorry, for the antibiotic, for the microbiological analysis, and the patient should be given antibiotic treatment, right? So remember that maternal sepsis is very rare from amniocentesis or CVS. The chances of that happening are less, but you need to tell that to the patient that it is a serious complication on the consent form itself. Now the procedure related pregnancy loss rate was 1.4% for transcervical CVS. So they tried both transabdominal and transcervical CVS, and you have to remember that transcervical CVS, the pregnancy rate loss rate was 1.4, and for transabdominal it was 1%. But the risk of pregnancy loss after transcervical CVS was 0.27 when the forceps were used and 3.1 when the cannula was used. So which means that whenever you're going doing transcervical CVS, you go for forceps because that has got less risk of pregnancy loss. So the forceps were offering more safety advantage than the cannula. Okay, you need not remember these figures, but just remember this point. Now this is a very important chart. It has got all the risks that are associated with amniocentesis. Now there is a chance that you need to repeat the procedure, right? So repeating the procedure increases in the third trimester, right? With amniocentesis. But when you go for amniocentesis after 15 weeks, this is a general chart regarding that. So second sampling or repeat procedure is up to 5% in amniocentesis, whereas up to 6% in amniocentesis, and in CVS also it is up to 6%. So for both amniocentesis and CVS, the second sampling or repeat procedure chances are 6% only. The blood stain sample, so there is a high chance of having blood stain sample in amniocentesis as compared to the CVS, right? Then whereas in CVS there is this blood stain sample is not even applicable. Confined placental mosaicism. So remember, in CVS we go to the placenta, right? So this is more likely to occur in CVS, and the chances are even less than 2%, but they are there. And of course in amniocentesis there is no chance. So remember, blood stain sample goes for amniocentesis and confined placental mosaicism goes for CVS. Maternal cell contamination is 1 to 2% for both, right? Rapid test failure is 2% for both. Now there is a chance of failure of the cell culture, right? So whatever cell culture that we get from both these procedures, there is a chance that we do not get enough of it, or there is a chance that we don't get any result out of it. So that is 0.5% in amniocentesis and 0.5 to 1% in CVS. Now, severe infection, fetal injury, and maternal visceral injury are all very rare in both the procedures, right? Because it just involves a needle. Okay, so this is a very important chart. Just remember about the blood stain samples, remember about the confined placental mosaicism, and remember about the second sampling. So these are the most important things to remember. The other two things are same for both, that is maternal cell contamination and rapid test failure, which is around 1 to 2%, right? Going ahead, now this is for the twin pregnancy. Most operators use double uterine entry when performing amniocentesis or CVS in multiple pregnancies. So they enter the uterus twice, right? However, the limited data available suggests that there is no difference whether they go enter the uterus once or they do it with a single entry. Okay. Similarly, for CVS there appears to be no significant difference in the pregnancy loss with trans-abdominal or trans-cervical, or with the use of single or double needle technique. So it doesn't make any difference, right? The risk of cross-contamination during CVS is approximately, cross-contamination, that means from one twin to another, right? So there is a chance of cross-contamination during CVS is approximately 1% and may be mitigated by use of double uterine entry technique. And that is why, because there is a chance of cross-contamination during CVS, they use double uterine entry technique in the twin pregnancies, right? So based on the current available evidence, operators should use the technique which they are most comfortable. So they have hardly found much difference. So if you are comfortable with double uterine, go for that, right? Now, what is required for training? Now, this is very important. This is again very important for your part 3, because this is asked in the stations. So, what is the competency that is required for doing amniocentesis and CVS? The competency is by completing or supervising ideally on a minimum of 20 amniocentesis or CVS procedures annually. So, a person should do at least 20 amniocentesis or CVS in a year, right? And they should at least complete or supervise, right? Then there should be communication skills training. There should be continuous audit, right, about the failures, or there are multiple insertions, if or any of the complications, if it keeps on happening, or there are more pregnancy losses, then there should be audit within 14 days. Remember this, there should be audit within 14 days of the procedure. So whenever the complication happens, within 14 days you should go for a audit. Also seek support from the more experienced operators, of course, and remember this thing that I have marked, that review practice where the operator's annual loss rate of normal babies exceeds 3% for either amniocentesis or CVS. We have seen that the pregnancy loss rate should be less than 0.5, and wherever you find that it is more than 3%, then it should be reviewed. There should be review practice, right? Now about the maternal sepsis, which is very rare complication, of course, but it may happen either because of the organisms which are present on the skin, or because of the ultrasound probe or the gel, or via the needle puncture of the bowel. The needle punctures the bowel during the entry. So any of these things can cause the maternal sepsis. So you require to do skin decontamination. You need to use a separate sterile gel sachet enclosing the ultrasound probe, right, in a sterile bag, and there should be continuous ultrasound that should go on so as to avoid the needle pricking the bowel or anywhere else. So if on inspection the amniotic fluid is cloudy, we have seen what to do with it. We have to send it to the microbiology for analysis and then go for the antibiotic treatment. Now these are few very important points which we have seen, that there is good evidence that the amniocentesis should not be performed before 15 weeks. We know that. But why? Because there is a high risk of pregnancy loss and there is a potential for Talipes equinovarus. Remember this point, why it shouldn't be done before 15 weeks? There is more risk of Talipes equinovarus. Early amniocentesis also resulted in increase of, that is 3%, in requirement of multiple needle insertions, right? And individual laboratories have reported increased risk of obtaining low quantities of DNA from direct extraction where amniocentesis is performed before 16 weeks. So remember, there is a very if you do it very early, there is a chance of Talipes equinovarus. Also there is a chance of getting low quantity of DNA, so there is a chance of getting negative results, right? Or there is failure, right? So you need to do the procedure again. So better to go for amniocentesis from 16 weeks onwards, right? But of course it can be performed from 15 weeks. CVS should not be performed before 10 weeks, right? Remember that. Why it shouldn't be performed before 10 weeks? Because there is a possible risk of oromandibular and limb defects. Okay, CVS, there is oromandibular and limb defects. Amniocentesis, there is Talipes equinovarus, right? CVS is performed between 11 and 13 plus 6 weeks of gestation, and if required, remember that if required, can be performed between 14 plus 6 weeks. Okay, so this is the same thing, that is you require to map the pregnancy when you're going for the accurate sampling, right? Whenever there are multiple pregnancies, there is a high chance of pregnancy loss that goes to around 1%. And whenever there is a problem or you find that there is an abnormality that you have seen, remember they have also mentioned that it shouldn't be called as abnormality. Whenever you go for counseling of these couples, they should be referred to as there is a difference. These children are different. They shouldn't be called abnormal, right? So remember all these things, and they should be referred to the specialist counseling services. This is very important point, and it is really very important when you go to your part 3. So supporting the women, counseling the women, this is a more important part of the practice as compared to what is diagnosed, because of course taking care of the patient is highly appreciable in NHS. So what is the role of third trimester amniocentesis? So whenever amniocentesis is required in third trimester, what is the recommendation? The risk associated with third trimester diagnostic amniocentesis, including the risk of preterm labor, are likely to be low. Yes, the risk of preterm labor are low, but what is the risk? If it is to be done before 34 weeks, the risk of preterm labor is 3 to 4%. The risk of preterm labor is 3 to 4%. Okay. Women should be informed that there is a higher risk of cell culture failure with amniocentesis performed in the third trimester. Also, in the third trimester, there is more chance of cell culture failure, right? And also, there is overall 10% risk of cell culture failure in the third trimester, but there is a higher risk. The risk is higher with advancing gestation. So as the gestation increases in the third trimester, there is more chance of cell culture failure. Also, there is a chance of preterm labor before 34 weeks, and it is around 3 to 4%. Most operators, I think we have seen this, double uterine artery. Yeah. Now this is also very important thing, right? What are the risks from mother to child of the infection? Remember, there is a high chance that if the mother has got any viral infection, that goes to the baby. So you need the mother needs to be checked for HIV, hepatitis, right? So where screening results for blood-borne viruses are not known, if you don't know whether the mother is negative or non-reactive for HIV and HBs antigen, then you need to wait. Okay, you need to wait for the procedure. And remember that the risk of mother to child transmission of HIV is higher for women not on highly active antiretroviral therapy. If the mother is not on highly active antiretroviral therapy, and if the mother has got higher viral loads, then of course there is a high chance of transmission to the baby. The risk of mother to child transmission for HIV on highly active antiretroviral therapy is very low. So whenever there are undetectable viral loads, there is a very less chance of transmission, right? So you need to go for undetectable viral load and then go for the intervention, right? Then the risk of mother to child transmission of hepatitis B is very low, or is low with viral load less than, remember this, 6.99 log 10 copies per ml. 6.99 log to the bottom 10 copies per ml, but increases with the higher viral load. So it should be less than 7 log 10. Remember that, okay, for hepatitis B. And for hepatitis C, because there is a limited data, there is no evidence of transmission from mother to child with hepatitis C. But remember, all of them should be undetectable, right? So, or if you have to do it in emergency, you need to tell that to the patient, you need to give her the emergency dose, and inform your seniors, and only after precautions it needs to be done, right? So this is a very small guideline. Remember this guideline thoroughly. There are very few numbers to remember, and go through the videos, both the videos of amniocentesis and CVS that are there on the website, and I hope this has helped you. Thank you very much.